Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. One of the problems of being led by buffoons is that Zimbabwe now finds itself in this unenviable position where every other buffoon in the neighborhood feels they have got a right to have a say in what is going on in the country. Listen to this one.
Look, I think for me, the issue of the documentary on the gold scam in Zimbabwe concerning President Mnangagwa and his administration, and then involving Ambassador Yoberenjo, I think from where I stand, as a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Zambia from 2014 to 2018, doesn't amount to much. Because diplomats have to go beyond the call of duty to convince investors that they have the ear of the principal, who is the president, that they're the rightful ones to convince you to go in their country. And remember, we are competing for the same investors, same interests. And so one has to use their ingenuity to make sure that they attract their investors in their country. And so there's nothing strange about what we saw behind the scenes. And remember, the conversation is being held behind the scenes. Diplomats do all kinds of things in trying to convince investors to go in their jurisdictions. Some have to throw cocktails. Some have to invite people for holidays. Some have to do all kinds of things to invite investors to go and invest in their own country. And for a country like Zimbabwe, we have to understand it from the perspective of the sanctions that Zimbabwe is going through. Zimbabwe has been going through excruciating sanctions, and President Mnangagwa needs to be encouraged instead of being vilified. Ambassador Oberenjo also has to be encouraged. He is doing a lot of good for his country amidst all these challenges, and he has managed to put his name to his country's growth and economic emancipation. And because of that, these people need to be encouraged. Therefore, from where I stand, there's nothing strange about that documentary. Only that somebody had ulterior motives, wanting to reach a certain conclusion in order to cement their argument. But truth be told, that's what most diplomats do behind the scenes. They do all kinds of things behind the scenes to convince their investors to go in their country. And as a result, you find that they have to say what they should say. Behind the scenes, so much is said. But unfortunately, we are seeing it and trying to portray that monies were going in people's pockets. And from that documentary I've seen, there is no evidence there to show that money was going in Ambassador Angel's account or President Mnangagwa's account. It was all for the country. That is why I saw there is a Chamber of Commerce involved, meaning that the money, obviously, the proceeds, from the way government works, proceeds will have to go back to government coffers. So my take on this is that I think there is no halabalo. We should not cry wolf when we see a puppy. Diplomats have got a lot of work, and anybody who was scared to be a diplomat will tell you that there's a lot of work involved in convincing an investor. I know it myself. I have had experience for 5 years working in that field. I have had people come to me myself. We have had to go to people, and what we discuss behind the scenes remains behind the scenes. But what we are seeing now is trying to play down the role of diplomats and postpone on diplomats. I think for me, the story is neither here nor there.
This is really tragic. He completely misses the point completely. The issue here is, as uh, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe itself has pointed out, that the the Zimbabwe is the sanctions do not affect Zimbabwe's trade in diamonds. So in this particular case, to keep on harping on about sanctions is to miss the point completely. The important thing here is even the negotiations that Hubert Angel was doing, he knew that this was dirty money. In other words, this was money laundering. The gold itself was also going to be smuggled. There are no records being kept so that people can trace how much gold is leaving the country and so that the country can benefit from it. The people involved in the mining of the gold, smuggling it out, are not paying corporate tax or income tax for the individual. Why? Because that is part of the laundering. That is part of the smuggling. That is part of the of the cheating, so that the few individuals involved benefit from it. And to say that we didn't see any money being given to Angel or President Mnangagwa, again, from historic record, Angel is, according to his own boasting, he has got a fortune worth 60 million US dollars. And I can bet you most of that money he made through this kind of dirty business. President Mnangagwa himself is incredibly rich. Listening to that documentary, Hubert Angel boasts of how he was going to have a war chest of 240 million US dollars from his own money for the coming elections. Where did he get it? Certainly not from his presidential salary. It's from this kind of activity. And therefore, then for somebody to keep on, missing the point completely, is totally unacceptable. Zimbabwe's crown jewels are being sold for a song for the purposes of making a quick buck for the smugglers themselves, the enablers themselves, and for President Mnangagwa and the few who are in the ruling elite. That is what is happening here. And the proceeds are being used or abused to undermine the democratic process. One of the gold mafia, Kamlash Patni, the Indian of Kenyan descent, boasted in those videos that he helped the former dictator of Kenya, Arap Moi, to survive by buying the opposition. So all the millions of dollars that he's making, some of it goes towards subverting the democratic will of the people by buying off the opposition, buying the officials who helped the regime rig the elections. When he left Kenya, he came to Zimbabwe and was now working for the late Robert Mugabe. And when he was disposed, he started working for the present, Emerson Mnangagwa. We cannot deny that he has been doing an excellent job for Mnangagwa to help Mnangagwa stay in power. The behavior of Zimbabwe's opposition leaves a lot of questions unanswered. During the GNU, they failed to implement even one meaningful democratic change. And yet that was the primary purpose of the GNU. SADC leaders tried to nag the opposition to implement the reforms. And our friend here was Minister of Foreign Affairs, 2014. He came in soon after the GNU had concluded. But he must have known that during the GNU, the reason why the GNU had been a complete utter failure is that the opposition had failed to implement reforms. And the only rational explanation why they failed to implement even one meaningful reform is that Mugabe bribed them. Indeed, ZANU PF's own cronies were boasting during the GNU when asked why was the opposition not implementing any reforms. They were boasting and saying, well, mazwane MDC the MDC leaders have learned to enjoy the gravy train without rocking the boat. In other words, they will not implement any reforms. And since the GNU debacle, MDC and now Triple C have been participating in these elections, which everybody can see ZANU-PF is rigging. And yet, again and again, they have insisted in participating. The only rational explanation for that is that Mnangagwa is using some of the loot from all the diamond smuggling and gold smuggling, and now lithium has come into the sphere of some of the minerals being looted in the country, and platinum as well. So he's using some of that wealth to buy the opposition, to buy ZEC officials, the police, and other senior state institution officials, including the traditional leaders, to help him rig the elections. We cannot pretend that there was nothing unusual about the gold smuggling and the money laundering in Zimbabwe. To keep saying that is to miss the point completely. Completely. And I'm really disappointed that somebody who had managed to rise to the position of being Minister of Foreign Affairs could miss the point completely. Jesus. It really is disappointing. Zimbabwe is having a serious problem. And we now have a regime that is determined to sell the country's crown jewels just to stay in power. No nation can afford this kind of blatant, reckless spending for the sake of the few individuals who are in power. 80% of Zimbabwe's $2 billion worth gold industry is being looted. That's 1.6 billion US dollars per year. That is unbelievable. And for a country that whose GDP is 28 billion US dollars, and we are only talking of gold here. If we were to add diamonds, lithium, platinum, and other areas like the sale of fuel and so forth, the amount of money that Zimbabwe is leaking is unbelievable. It's simply unbelievable. And no wonder the country is in total economic meltdown. And we are stuck with the regime because we can't change it, because it's using some of the looted wealth to buy off officials so that he can rig the elections, to buy off the electorate, the opposition, so that they can keep on participating and give the process legitimacy. This is the problem we are in. And frankly, we were expecting some of our SADC leaders to realize that Zimbabwe is in a serious situation and stop wittering up nonsense about sanctions. That is utter nonsense. That has nothing to do with it. We expect SADC to observe the coming elections in Zimbabwe. We expect SADC to judge those elections on the basis of what they find on the ground. And so far, there is overwhelming evidence that NPF is rigging these elections. The regime is stubbornly refused to produce a verified voters' roll. The regime has already denied 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote for no other reason other than that the regime fears that those people will not vote for ZANU-PF, and the party itself will have no opportunity to rig the election results outside Zimbabwe. The regime has stubbornly refused to implement even one of the recommendations from the European Union report after 2018 elections. These are the clear examples of how this election is going to be flawed. We expect SADC to judge those elections on those bases. And this idea that ZANU-PF is under pressure from sanctions and is doing all these things because of sanctions is a feeble excuse that we are not going to accept. And if our friends in SADC are going to start selling us out on that basis, well, we have to say here and now that that is not going to go down well. We are not going to accept it. As much as SADC, it wasn't SADC's fault that the 2008 to 2013 GNU failed. Nonetheless, they should stop punishing the whole country because MDC leaders sold out. And we certainly are not going to accept feeble excuses for supporting ZANU-PF under this nonsensical claim that ZANU-PF is under sanctions. There is no such thing as ZANU-PF failing to sell its gold in a conventional, open way so that the whole country benefits from it because of sanctions. That is nonsense. That has nothing to do with it. It is selling the diamonds in the black market because that is the only way the few in the ruling elite can benefit without the whole country benefiting from such business activities. That is what we are dealing with here. And please, if you've got nothing to say, shut up. We are really sick and tired of people who really don't know what they're talking about, pretending that they know. If you don't know the difference between looting, well, just shut up. Thank you.